All right, what's going on? Hope you're doing well. I think we will be watching this on a Thursday. This is the third time that we've read. So hopefully we had a good discussion about what we've already read. So Sang, mom, only two characters we've met so far, right? We've heard about David's mom. We've heard about David. Today we will meet David. I hope you like this story. I really like this story. But again, I'm not your age, and I think you might like this story. I don't know. Started off a little slow, probably a little bit too much about leaves at the beginning. But here, I think it's going to get pretty intense. So let's start reading. Spoiler alert, right? I feel super bad for Sang. She's got, I think, a lot of pressure on her. And I believe we ended on paragraph 23. So let's start right there. We'll learn a little bit about Mrs. Lambert. I don't think we've read this part. So it's kind of important about Mrs. Lambert. So if we read it twice, it'll be okay. But Mrs. Lambert, their sponsor in the United States, was a large, genial woman with a ready smile and two brown braids wreathed around her head. We might have read this. The wife of the Lutheran minister in their town, she had already helped sponsor two Laotian refugee families and seemed to have enough energy and goodwill to sponsor several more. 4 years ago, yeah, we did read this, sorry, when they first arrived, it was she who had taken the Povong family on their rounds of medical checkups, social welfare interviews, school enrollments, and housing applications. So just to put in perspective, if you are a family coming from another country, there's a lot to do just to get your foot in the door in the United States. So you have to do all those things. And it would be helpful if you had someone that knew the process and spoke English. So that's what Mrs. Lambert is. She seems kind of religious. Her husband, that's his job. He's a religious guy. He's a minister. So 24 right here. And it was Mrs. Lambert who had suggested, after Sang had finished her driver education course, that she use David's car to take her driving test. Cheerfully, David, a senior on the school basketball team, had driven Sang around and taken her for a few test runs in his car to familiarize her with it. And that's important. If you're going to be taking a driving test, you don't want to be driving that car for the first time when you're taking the test. So it's good that David took her around. She knows where the handles are, whatever, steering wheel and mirrors and stuff. That's good. Might give her a leg up. Exciting times they might have been for Sang. It was the closest she had ever come to being on a date. But for David, it was just something he was doing out of deference to his mother. Sang had no illusions about it. So let's break that down a little bit. So David is doing this for her mom, for his mom, and Sang kind of realizes it. She's not fooled by it. Nor did she really mind it. It was enough for her at this point to just vaguely pretend at dating. At 16, she did not really feel ready for some of the things most 13-year-olds in America seem to be doing. Even watching MTV sometimes made her wince in embarrassment. So right there, boom, I'm thinking time period. I don't know if you've noticed that every time we read, I'm like, what time period did this happen in? So MTV, I don't know. What do you think? 80s, probably? 90s, early 90s, maybe? Probably somewhere around my childhood. So I think so. MTV doesn't have the same grip on teenagers as it once did. It's too many other things, but when I was growing, probably sick of hearing stories of me growing up, but MTV was the thing. All right, moving on. I'll skip a story I was going to tell about myself. Too boring, right? Let's do it. This is Sang's mother talking. He's a good boy, David is, Sang's mother said, as if echoing Sang's thoughts. Remember, they're in the garden doing stuff with plants. Listening to his mother and father, she poured the hot peppers in her cupped palm to a woven basket and looked at Sang. How are you going to thank him for letting you use his car and everything? Sang considered this. I'll say thank you, I guess. Isn't that enough? I think not. Why don't you buy for him a Big Mac? Big Mac was one of the few English words Mrs. Povong would say, pronouncing it B-Mac. Ever since her husband had taken them to a McDonald's as a treat after his first pay raise, she had thought of Big Macs as the epitome of everything American. To her daughter's surprise, she fished out a $20 bill from her coat pocket now and held it out to Sang. You can buy yourself one too, a Big Mag. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sang did not know what to say. Here was a woman so frugal. That's a good word to know. Maybe we could talk about that in a minute. Frugal. She had insisted on taking home her containers after her McDonald's meal, suddenly handing out $20 for two children to splurge on. Take it, child, Ms. Po Wong said. Now go. You don't want to be late for your test. She smiled. How nice it'll be when you drive us to work. Think of all the time we'll save and the bus fares. All right, so eventually there will be a Google form, a final assessment for the winter hibiscus, and I'll let you know. One of the questions is, why does Miss Provong, hope I'm saying that right, if she's so frugal, why does she give her daughter $20? Okay, so if this is the 1980s, $20, I mean, even 2022, $20 can get you a lot of McDonald's. Believe me, I know too much about McDonald's. I'm trying to cut back on McDonald's. But you can buy, certainly probably 3 people, stick to the dollar menu or something. You know, Big Mac, 2 people, the meal and stuff might cost you $20. But back in the 80s, that's a lot of money. So the question is, 2 questions. What does frugal mean? And then the other question is, why would her mom give Sang all of this money so that she can use it to, like, give David a treat? You know, we'll pause there. If you're watching at home, I mean, frugal is a nice way to say cheap, but it's a nice way, like careful with their money. Cheap has a bad connotation. When you hear that and you call someone cheap, like the connotation, the meaning behind the word that you don't see in the dictionary would be bad. Frugal, even though they mean the same thing, just frugal sounds better. Like, oh, they're careful with their money. And the other reason, hopefully somebody said that, I think it's a hard one, but it seems like the mom thinks that she's going to be saving money in the long run, and it's kind of like maybe a thank you for Sang and having her driver's license, which makes me worry because I think Sang is going to have a lot of pressure. At least I would. A lot is riding, no pun intended. A lot is riding on this driver's test here. All right, at the bottom, take it, child. No, 31 here. The money, tucked safely away in her coat pocket, seemed to keep Sang warm on her walk across town to the site of the driving test. So she's got to walk a long way to get there, it seems like. And when I read that, tucked safely, I'm like, uh-oh. I was thinking that might be foreshadowing for, like, she's going to lose that money. But she reached it a few minutes early, stood out on the corner, glancing around her. There were a few other teenagers waiting on the sidewalk or sitting on the hoods of their cars, but David was nowhere in sight. So a lot could go wrong here. David was nowhere in sight. On the opposite side of the street was now the McDonald's restaurant. And for a moment, she imagined how it would be to have David and her sitting at one of the window seats, facing each other in satisfyingly full view of all the passerby. A light honk brought her back to reality. David cruised by, waving at her from the car window. He parallel parked the car with an effortless swerve that Sang admired and got out. Oh, hey, a quick story here. Real quick. I failed my driver's test the first time I took it. It's a little nerve-wracking. I think today you can pay a little extra to go on the course beforehand with, like, I didn't do that. And so I couldn't parallel park. Still can't today. That's what failed me the first time. A lot of times when we're, like, going to Portland or Boston and, you know, in the bigger cities, you have to kind of parallel park. Even like downtown Lewis and Auburn, I don't. I just, my wife will sometimes switch seats and she'll parallel park for me. It's not embarrassing. I don't care. And then some people it might be. But then a lot of times I'll just try to pick a spot where I can just pull into. It's a whole thing, parallel parking. It's not easy, but seems like David is pretty good at it. But it is one thing you'll have to do to pass your driving test. All right, ready? David asked. eyebrow arched quizzically as he handed her the car, handed her his keys. So there's no like, hey, how you doing? There's no banter beforehand. It's just like, ready? Almost like David's doing this as kind of a job. Sang nodded. Her mouth suddenly felt dry and she licked her lips. Don't forget, step on the gas real gently. You don't want to jerk the car forward the way you did last time, David said with a grin. Well, that's good. It seems like he's nice. And there's a little exposition. Things haven't gone exactly well in the past. I won't, Sang said and managed a smile. Another car drove up, and the test instructor stepped out of it and onto the curb in front of them. He was a pale, overweight man whose thick lips jutted out from behind a bushy mustache. On his paunch was a balanced clipboard, which he was busy marking. Finally, he looked up and saw Sang. Miss Sang Pavlong? He asked, slurring the name so much that Sang did not recognize it as her own until she felt David nudge her slightly. Yes, sir, she answered. Your turn. Get in. Then Sang was behind the wheel. The paunchy man seated next to her, clipboard on his lap. Drive to the end of the street, take a right, the test instructor said. He spoke in a low, bored staccato that Sang had strained to understand. Even if you aren't, if English isn't your first language, a lot of times we'll just like, gotta, we don't say got to, I gotta go, it's like and it might be tough for her to anybody, even if they're a native English speaker and your instructor is English speaker, it's a lot of pressure, that driving test, one of the most pressure-filled tests you'll ever take. And then, of course, if the language is not your first, it's like just added pressure there. Oh, it's rough, man. I feel bad for you. I hope you passed the first time. I know some people who passed the first time and some people who failed the first time. Obediently, she started up the car. Careful to step on the accelerator very slowly and ease the car out into the middle of the street. Check the rearview mirror, make the hand gestures, take a deep breath, Sang told herself. So far, so good. At the intersection, the end of the street, she slowed down. Two cars were coming down the cross street towards her at quite a high speed. Instinctively, she stopped and waited for them both to drive past. Instead, they both stopped as if waiting for her to proceed. So it could have been one of those like four-way stops, like whoever gets there first, gets to go first. There's a whole it's kind of weird, but you'll get used to it when you stop at a four-way. Sometimes you have to communicate, like if two people got there at the same time, like you can hand gesture, like, hey, you can go, it's okay. But for a driving test, there's a lot more pressure. If you arrive there first, they're going to want you to do like what's correct. Feel bad for Sang. Probably not going to go well here, right? Better to be cautious, she decided, and waited, switching gears over to neutral. Yeah, you definitely want to be a defensive driver. You want to be able to react to whatever is happening to you. But if you're like slowing down traffic and making other drivers have to decide on things that you should be deciding, yeah, it's not going to look good. So she's probably already messed up. Oh, poor Sang. But who knows? Maybe the guy will be nice. For what seemed an interminable moment, nobody moved. Then the other cars went through the intersection, one after the other. Carefully, Sang then took her turn. Turn signal, hand signal, look both ways. As she continued to drive down the street, out of the corner of her eye, she saw the instructor mark something on his clipboard. A mistake, she thought. He's writing down a mistake I just made. But what did I do wrong? She stole a quick look at his face. It was stern but impassive. Maybe I should ask him right now what I did wrong, Sang wondered. Watch out, he suddenly exclaimed. That's a stop sign. Startled, Sang jerked the car to a stop, but not soon enough. They were right in the middle of the crossroads. So she basically ran a stop sign. That's not good. The instructor shook his head with an almost imperceptible gesture. That's a good word. We should have that on one of our lists. The English teacher and me like, oh, that's a good word. Good to know. Imperceptible. It means like you almost can't, it's there, but you almost can't see it. Imperceptible. Oh, it's a good word. Good word. Imperceptible gesture, but Sang noted it with a sinking feeling in her stomach. Back up, he snapped. Her heart beating hard, Sang managed to reverse the car and back up to the stop sign that she had just gone through. You might as well go back to where you started out, the instructor said. Take a right here and another right at the next intersection. It's over, Sang thought. He doesn't even want to see me go up to the hill or parallel park or anything. I failed. All right. I just wanted to get through that part, cliffhanger. I didn't want anybody to get mad or riot. Like, we need to know, did she pass or not? Because you're all so invested in the story. I hope you like it. I got one real quick. Love this story that I heard. Got a YouTube channel, 10K. It's not that big. Hopefully one day it will be. But I do have like channel members that I've gotten to know over the last couple of years. People, they pay me a little extra a month. Sometimes we'll have chats on Zoom or whatever. And there's one lady, very generous to the channel. She helps me out a lot. Nice super chats. She's originally from Somalia, but she moved to Ottawa, Canada. She lives there now. She's learning English. Her English is actually pretty good. But when she got here, not long after, very much like Sang, she had to take a driver's test. And it was a lot like Sang. Like, she knew before she made it back to the office that she failed. I think the guy told her. She knew. Either way, she knew she failed. So you know what she did? She literally kicked the test instructor out of the car and made him walk back. I couldn't believe it. Like, to hear her tell the story, I was rolling. But literally, the man had to walk back because he failed her. She was not happy. I don't know what she did wrong, but she wasn't going to take it. She eventually has her driver's license. She loves shopping. She loves Tim Hortons, good Canadian coffee. Anybody know Tim Hortons? All right, good place for us to stop. A little time to work in class, and then a little Frank and Beans. How about that? All right, adios.